The law matters. Of course it does. Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This program, as we tell you, has been created to educate, inform, and help you decide how to protect yourself, your family, and your business. It's information and resources that may help you manage legal issues that you encounter. Or you'll be better prepared to work with the professional counsel you select. Either way, our goal is always to help you save time, money, and achieve the best possible results. We continue to welcome and thank our fabulous attorney, David Bazar, from the Bazar and Associates law firm in East Providence, who continues to share his legal information and insights on the various issues that we tackle. So today, business risks and losses, contracts and claims. When you open a business, you also open up the door to liability. Employee claims, EEOC, commercial leases, contracts, and so on. All of them offer opportunity for you to have business claims and legal suits against you. So today we're going to tackle some of the common issues, what to anticipate, and how you might manage to wend your way through those legal entanglements. So David, from what I was reading, there are an awful lot of employee-based issues. What do you find are the most popular, most common ones that you encounter with businesses that have troubles?
Employee-based issues, the most common one is usually a workers' compensation claim. Someone gets hurt in the course of their employment and they have a claim for workers' comp. And the rules are, especially I know in Rhode Island, that if you have one or more employees other than yourself, you need to have workers' compensation insurance. So
before we get into that, I did find that everything concerning employee risks has attached to it you should have employment insurance, and there is a listing of perhaps 8 or 9, 10, 11 different kinds depending on the size of your establishment and what kinds of things that you do for your business. So we'll get into those. But so when someone is starting a business, say you've helped them incorporate their business and you're advising them, you're not doing a business plan necessarily for them, but I'm sure you could. Do you advise them right off the bat when they're starting a business, go for insurance?
There are certain insurances you have to have, and depending on where your place of work is, whether you're renting from somebody and you have the public invited into the area, whether it's a franchise as we talked about last time or a retail shop of some type, there's a whole host of insurances that you should have and that I would recommend. General liability insurance for someone who comes in and may get hurt on your premises. Workers' compensation insurance, as we just spoke about. Insurance for business interruption. If something happens to where you work and whatever it is you're doing, you can't transact business, there should be insurance to ensure that you have some money coming in to pay your bills, because the income may stop, but the bills don't. There's insurance for employment discrimination claims or sexual harassment claims, depending on how big a business you're operating. It's not a bad idea to have insurance for those types of things too.
When they talk about employment practices liability, a catchphrase, I guess, that encompasses things like discrimination, wrongful termination, harassment, failure to promote. If someone says, I should have been next in the queue, or I have more credentials, or you didn't promote me because I'm over 40. Right. All of those kinds of things, there's insurance against them, and does that really help?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what type of a commercial tenant has in a commercial lease. So if you breach your lease, it's a bit easier for the commercial landlord to evict you than the process that a tenant can go through with a residential landlord.
You often talk about the differences between payments and terms. For a business, that could be a little bit prickly. If someone's starting a business, I'm sure that they did a pro forma, in other words, projections of how they're going to make their money and pay their bills. What do you do, or what do you advise a small business owner as he's entering a lease agreement, which I'm sure some landlord might want 1 year, 3 years, 5 years out? How do you advise them to not get into a bind?
All right, so we were just scratching the surface of some of the provisions in a commercial lease. So you've got a new business and you're hoping that's going to be successful. And the landlord says, you're a new business, I'm hoping you're going to be successful, but I want you to personally guarantee the lease. So as the lawyer for the tenant, the new business, first and foremost, one of the first things we did, and we may have talked about this in the prior show, is we want you to incorporate. And whether it's an LLC, limited liability company, or a corporation, and we talked about all those different structures last time, we want you to have an entity separate from yourself that is the one that's going to sign the lease. The landlord wants you to personally guarantee the lease because that's a new entity, and if the entity doesn't make it, the entity folds, they don't have anybody to go after for the balance of the lease. So I would rather see you have a longer term lease with option periods so that you have something of value with the lease itself as the tenant, and have a very limited period of time for the guarantee. So that's one way to protect yourself, and also to have an asset, because the other thing you want is another clause in the contract, which is that you have the right to assign the lease. And what that gives you is, if you sell the business, you want to be able to assign the lease to the person who's buying the business so that they know that they have time in the business to make money at that location. Landlords generally want to have some control over that. So you have to negotiate language that allows the lease to be assigned, but may require some permission, not unreasonably withheld, by the landlord.
So tied into that, would you also say that it's in the tenant's best interest, while he's dealing with the landlord and they haven't signed on the dotted line yet, for them to be able to sublease if they needed to?
Sublease or assign, usually a similar clause.
Similar.
Assign means you are probably selling it and you want to assign your entire right and responsibilities under the lease to somebody else. Sublease means you want to sublease a little portion of what
Yes.
you're renting.
Yes,
Those are
perhaps.
both important terms.
And when you're working with that tenant, do you often get directly involved with, or just indirectly involved in coaching how to negotiate the best terms for that client?
We'll do both, depending on what they want to hire us to do. Certainly, at a minimum, we want to review the lease before they sign it and go over the important terms with them. Many times, they'll hire us to negotiate the lease because they're probably negotiating with a very large company and want to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of.
And I'm sure you have your own checklist as to who's responsible for renovations and repairs and what if and if thens.
Right, lots of different things. We, again, only have touched the surface, but if it's a shopping center, making sure you have access to enough parking. If it's signage that you need, do you have the ability to put up signs? If you need to make renovations, do you need to get the landlord's permission? Does the landlord contribute to renovations? If at the end of the lease there are fixtures, what does the landlord expect you to leave behind? What are you allowed to take? Lots of issues.
And just about cash flow in general, a small business often, again, even if they have a pro forma, they might not know how their cash flow is going to work as they're starting out. I'm sure that that makes the landlord nervous and makes him want to secure his best possible deal. You working, for example, for the tenant, how would you counsel him to have it work favorably for him? So in other words, I don't know, maybe it might be a seasonal business, which would certainly affect cash flow, or maybe he needs a year and a half to have smaller payments and then have them increase the second year. How do you work toward that?
We've done that in many different ways. There have been times where a landlord really wants to get a new business into the particular area that they have, and they're willing to have no rent for several months while they're first starting out, or a lower rent, and let them build into it so that they can start and get up and running. There are a number of different ways we have worked that out.
And what about when someone is saying, I'll either take a flat fee or just a percentage of your sales? Mm-hmm. How do you counsel someone with that? Again, with a new business, not a track record.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, there's certain shopping centers sometimes that want a percentage, and you try to make sure that you can project out what that percentage would be, what you're projecting your sales to be, what do you think that fits, because the landlord may want to say, this is what we're going to do, a percentage with a minimum of X. You might say, okay, that's fine, but it's a maximum of Y. and it's subject to negotiation. So if you're a new business and you got a landlord who's willing to do it, and you know what the percentage of sales should be for what you would be willing to put towards rent, then you can negotiate it out from that perspective.
So thinking about money in terms of what something's going to cost for rent and leasing things, or what you might get paid, back on the issue of being a new hire, we know that you're not supposed to discriminate when you're hiring and what you're paying a woman for versus a man, and of course countless suits go on that way. What do you say to someone who wants to know what the going rate is in that company? What's the guy getting in that comparable position? How do you deal with that?
What do you mean?
In other words, a woman might be offered the lower amount, but she might not know that. How do you counsel someone when they're just starting to take a new position and they don't know, or they're not familiar with what that company's wage practices are or
If
rates
you're talking about an employee.
An employee.
So the way these things usually come up is people talk. And so it's going to be a co-employee who says, I get this much vacation time, I get this much for pay, I get this, and then they'll find out. So first and foremost, when you took the job, hopefully you took the job at a rate that you were comfortable with. It's not until after you've taken the job that you might find out you're not being treated fairly.
Which is a good point, because while you can counsel someone to say you can look at what the industry rates or ranges are, it's not actually until you get into the organization and then start to find out informally, perhaps. But then you still have some recourse, right?
That's right. Yep.
That's good to know. We hope that this has been helpful to you as you look forward to planning for either employing people, starting businesses, looking for insurance, looking for businesses and commercial leases. If you need help, you might consider looking into a lawyer at this point, because at some point it ends up mattering. It makes a difference. As we say, the law matters. Stay tuned, because it matters to you.